to you, what is intuition and where does it come from? Like, how does someone even know they can rely on it?
So intuition is really that, you call it the spidey sense. You were talking about this earlier when we were during a break and about buying a different piece of equipment. Intuitively, you knew you had to do that at some point, but you didn't choose to do it until a certain thing. Well, it's there. You knew that this was eventually going to happen. And so when we started to be able to listen to ourselves and not go through so much noise, because there's plenty of noise out there. We've got social media, we've got phones, we've got Slack channels. There's so much noise that grabs our attention. But when you get those business ideas, all of your entrepreneurs are sitting in an audience. You had an idea and you went for it. You knew it was going to work. You didn't have any data really behind it. You just really had an inkling that's like, you know what? I think this is going to work.
You're in an argument with somebody and the other person says, you're a horrible human being. And the verbal assault has now triggered adrenaline and cortisol. You're now angry and you're in conflict. The minute that kicks in, we have the same chemicals because our body doesn't have a chemical to differentiate between being stabbed and being shouted at. There is no, you have cortisol and adrenaline, that's what you've got. Other chemicals, we have differentiations, right? Like, so I can feel happy in love, and that's oxytocin, and I can feel happy I have a donut, and that's dopamine. And I have two different chemicals, and I can feel the difference. If you train yourself, you can feel the difference in the chemicals, but I can definitely monitor the chemicals. But if I scream and shout at you or attack you with a knife, we look at it and we cannot see a difference. Right. Like, oh, you have cortisol and adrenaline. We know something bad's happening, but that's all we know. What I love about this is in that argument, I'm not actually arguing with you.
Right.
I'm arguing with the yes voice, the no voice, and the mentor. I never get to hear you. I'm actually arguing with everybody you've ever spoken to or argued with in the past. But I'm not arguing with you. You're not allowed in the argument. You're not allowed in the room because you've lost access to that problem-solving component that can argue until you calm down. And this is why, and I guarantee you, everyone in the room has experienced this, you walk away from the argument after, you go, I know what I should have said.
Right.
Because you, at that moment, had a reduction of cortisol and adrenaline enough that your brain is like, oh, we're going to go off of autopilot, which is, I like to think of three dudes on a ship. And they don't disturb the captain, he's sleeping. Like it'll take too long to get him. We can solve this ourselves. Turn right, turn left. Wait, captain said always turn right when there's a problem, right? That's how I vision it. And then when the crisis is averted, they're like, all right, now let's tell the captain, hey captain, we turned right. And the captain's like, good job, that's what I wanted you to do.
One of the things that I talk about a lot is like, get up from the desk and walk away. Because you've got so much stuff going in your brain, you are starting to trigger yourself as well just by doing it. You're creating your own stress by like, oh, I got to do this and I got to do this and I got like 6 emails to do. Get up, take 5 minutes, like you said, and go do something.
Well, I mean, and there's so much more. I love what you're saying about the desk as well, because at your desk, you get beep, and you're doing beep, and you go beep, and bing, bing, bing. Like every time you receive an email alert, a notification, even a number popping up on a little box on the screen reminding you there's something to do, it is a thought pattern interrupt that is a trigger to take action.
Right.
And anytime we're triggered to take action, we respond to it with adrenaline and cortisol because cortisol is the let's take action chemical.
Right.
And so cortisol isn't, like I said, my son doesn't have it and we have to give him it to help him survive. So it's not like, well, if we didn't have cortisol, life would be great. I'm telling you, I know for a fact it would be terrible. You have to have that stress chemical. Earlier on, we did a podcast with Rachel Miller about the importance of a bear chasing you. And I didn't want to deviate that podcast into this, but the reality is that bear triggers a cortisol release, which is a take action chemical. But it's also worth knowing that when you have the take action chemical, you have reactive thinking going on. So it's really important that you get out of the reactive thinking where we can only hear the voices in our head and wake up this other voice that can only come up in calm. And so we have to use cortisol in waves and use it productively in what it's supposed to be for, as opposed to a constant reaction. But you're going to get that reaction from notifications on a computer. So yeah, you're right. Moving out of that, going into nature, taking a moment to take some fresh air outside and remove yourself from the stressful scenario is going to help get you there.
Right. One of the things you were talking about is teaching your mentor.
Yes.
Teach your mentor these things. I guarantee you, most of you all don't know these things. What Adam was just talking about, but teaching that mentor, and that's where all of this stuff comes from, is your ability to go. We all consume so much information in a day. 38 gigs is, I think, what or 38 megabytes is what we consume every day. And sleep allows that to catalog in our brain. So these experiences that you have, now you can take and leverage that to teach your mentor the things that you need in order to, like, hey, I need to get up. I'm not in a good headspace right now. I got to walk up and walk away. Having the ability to really think about, hey, I don't want to have an argument with my wife. I need to walk away from it.
Think about this as a business owner and ask yourself, how many times have you made a decision when you're stressed? How many times have you had an argument where you're in conflict with somebody? How many times have you made a decision because an inside voice said something and you made the mistake of thinking that's you, as opposed to thinking, am I in cortisol right now? Do I have cortisol in my system? If I do, what can I do to reduce the cortisol, bring back my intuition, and make a decision based on that higher level? Because now you're playing in a different field. Now you're only making better decisions. And we actually, the reason we do this, obviously I'm in a dating company, we teach this heavily in dating.
Absolutely.
To never have an argument in cortisol. Instead, to state to the other person, hi, I'm so sorry. I'm in cortisol right now. You mean so much to me, but I can feel that I'm not making good communication. Would you give me a few minutes? I'm going to go and have a hot shower. You trigger this from the hot shower. I'm going to have a hot shower because the heat from a shower will trigger endorphins, which is one of the chemicals that neutralizes, like an antidote to cortisol. And a trigger warning, I'm going to say this because it's going to go like, trigger warning, if you are triggered by self-harm, you may not want to hear what I say next. But there is a lot of evidence to suggest that self-harm is actually an endorphin trigger that somebody has learned to trigger for themselves as a way to reduce stress in the system that is a method they can control.
Sure.
Because you can always secretly cause physical self-harm, which will trigger endorphin releases, which will counteract the stress hormone. And I believe, and the person that I hired to teach me this, I believe if this was more well known and there was no shame around self-harm and there was no blame going with it, and instead we recognize that this is an endorphin release and that endorphin release has a very real functional solution to reducing cortisol, methods can be made to educate someone that if they wish to find an alternate method of endorphin release, there are alternate methods. Not to put shame around what they're doing, but to be like, hey, there are other solutions if you want them.